Wet weather tires, controversial cautions, and a finish that had everyone jumping out of their seats for all of the wrong reasons. We break down the quote-unquote action from NASCAR's first trip to the quote-unquote action track at Richmond Raceway. Hello and welcome to High Stakes. My name is Mike Bachmann, joined by my co-host, Zach Catanzareti. Zach, you were in Richmond. I was able to watch the race from my couch, so we had two very different perspectives from this race. We're not going to waste any more time because there's just so much to unpack, so much to break down from what was, in my opinion, a pretty abysmal race to watch. I don't know what the vibe was at the track with boots on the ground, but let's just get right into it, Zach. And I want to start with your high stakes moment from the race, from the weekend. What is your moment?
Well, there was a moment that I don't think any of us really saw coming in terms of, the recent history at Richmond or just how the sport's been these last few months. We got an overtime finish, which we haven't had this season, which is pretty shocking. But that happened on the front stretch. I was actually standing in pit stall 5, just shooting cars going into turn 1. And I look up and Kyle Larson's facing my direction, coming right at me. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. That brought out a yellow. Him and Bubba got together, and honestly, I was partially disappointed because I knew, at least for Bubba, that he had a really strong night going. All night long, he was in the top 5. His results had been fairly quiet, lately. He started the year with back-to-back top 5s, and he's only had one top 15 since then. So I knew the pit stop coming up. With how 2311 has been for a long time, I knew he was in jeopardy, and turns out he was. But first off, we just had the entire field come down pit road, and we knew it was going to be one of those days where it comes down to that perfect pit stop. And I love when it's Joe Gibbs Racing guys against each other because they always pack the biggest punch on pit road, and just seeing Denny win the race, that doesn't really surprise me off pit road, at least, because that he's got the quickest guys, and it was really close for the 19. They didn't necessarily have a bad stop. It was just the 11 just did everything just a little bit better, and he was able to go from third to first, and Larson was able to retain his position, which kind of surprised me. I was on pit road, so I wasn't able to hear really what happened. But he just didn't lose that many positions. So he came off of pit road 4th. And as I said, Bubba had a bad stop, so he was near the back. And shockingly, once again, just a mini rant here. I think there were 16 cars on the lead lap when that caution came out, somewhere around there. And once again, nobody rolled the dice. And I always find that really surprising that, you get 16th place back there. They're not going to win the race under any circumstances from 16th. It will be phenomenal if they get a top 10. If you gain 6 spots in 2 laps on a restart, that's a fantastic result. I don't know why you don't stay out and roll the dice. It's really tough to win that race, but you're almost guaranteed a top 10, and a top 5 is well in the cards. You get TV time. The crew chief gets credit for being, calling a gutsy shot on the pit stop. And I don't know why stay out. It's just 2 laps. You have no idea what's going to happen. You come around to the white flag and a wreck happens behind you. Boom, you win the race, so why not take 2 tires? Yeah, we didn't see any dice being rolled there, which was disappointing, but not really surprising because that's tend to be how it is. But yeah, up front, it led to that final restart, and I know that's where Truex got pretty much lost the race. That's where Denny won the race in a very controversial way. Of course, this whole week we've learned a bit more about that, and you got to feel for Martin. It's not something new. We know the numbers that he has to his record of how often he dominates and wins races. Nearly half of his wins, he's led over 100 laps. He's just that type of guy who, when he wins, he annihilates the whole race. He doesn't tend to win the exciting races. When it does come down to finishes like this, he's often the one who's on the losing end. Doesn't matter what type of car he has, and he never bumps guys out of the way. And I've always felt this way about Martin, that he's been in the sport for so long. I just feel like that part of NASCAR and that part of the racing culture, he just never jived with it. You know, he was never somebody to give somebody a bump or do something, particularly for a race win. He's always the guy who gets kind of run over, and he wasn't run over in this result, especially by Denny. That was straight up nothing. I have no bones to pick with Hamlin at all. I think Martin being mad over that, I don't agree. I think he expected a teammate to kind of roll over and then just, you know, not give him the business a little bit and race for a win. And that's why Martin tends to lose these type of finishes. And him being mad at Larson, I understand that a little bit, but again, you're racing for the win at the end. You know, you got to be able to kind of expand what you're willing to do. And he's willing to bump guys and damage race cars after a finish. He's done that. You know, he did that with Logano at Martinsville a number of years ago, and he destroyed his race car after this. That happened right by me. He had 1 or 2 flat tires. I'm like, man, can't save that for pit road after the race. He had to damage your car. So it was a disaster for Martin at the end, and that's just how it went out for him.
Yeah, well, a lot to unpack there, but we have to talk about this restart because that last caution did lead to this overtime restart. And honestly, Zach, there was nothing we had to learn over the last few days because it was pretty cut and dry. It was pretty blatant that Denny Hamlin rolled early, jumped the restart. I want to focus on some comments that were made now a few days after the fact, both by Denny and also by Elton Sawyer and NASCAR itself, because to have I'm sorry, but it was an awful night for race control. I'm going to talk about another moment of the race that just absolutely killed the trajectory of where this race was going to. But as an official, to come out post-race and openly admit that Hamlin rolled early, that, you know, it was a quote-unquote bang-bang call is just utterly stupid, in my opinion. It was confusing on the broadcast because Fox is saying that NASCAR, the restart was not under review. They accepted it as a clean restart. And then post-race, you know, in speaking with reporters, Elton Sawyer said that they did, in fact, review the restart, deemed it was clean. I don't know which is correct, but the one thing I do know is with these restart violations, when we know and when NASCAR rather knows or deems that something is fishy, we know it's under review by the time cars hit the backstretch. I mean, there was a review in the Xfinity race. I believe it was Almirola. I forget who else it was. It was probably Chandler Smith or another Toyota. But there was a restart there that was under review. It was clearly accepted after the fact, but as soon as cars hit the backstretch, NASCAR is reviewing the restart, and there it is. So like I mentioned, Elton Sawyer goes out on Sirius XM, and my biggest issue with this, why I think it's utterly stupid and almost reckless to talk about this moment in this way, is he says, quote, "There's no doubt he," being Denny Hamlin, "rolled early. If this happens at lap 10 or 50 or 300, the call would have been different." What? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, why are these decisions based on circumstance? And right now, at this moment, overtime, where the stakes are highest, you're just going to let them go? Like, in what scenario, why would you call the restart differently if it were a different part of the race? That is, like, absolutely ridiculous to me, because a rule is a rule. Like, on paper, it's black and white. So to openly admit you would call it differently at a different moment of the race seems ridiculous to me. Like,
yeah, it's really fit. I know. I totally feel it. When I heard that, I was like, at least he was honest about it. But that opens up an entire can of like, oh, this completely exposes like certain other things that may happen during a race, like how they call certain calls, not just on restarts, but maybe on pit road or anything. Like, we know, like, sometimes they, you know, something will happen on the track during a green flag pit cycle, and they'll say, oh, they're going to hold off on the caution or just not throw one at all, so they don't interrupt the flow of how strategy goes. Of course, that was blown out with, you know, Kyle Busch and what happened with that yellow that that took away a whole bunch of strategy plays that were happening. But with this restart zone, like, yeah, it should be 100% every single time it happens, it gets called, especially when no doubt there was a violation that occurred. Him saying that reminded me of a huge confusion. 2008 at Talladega, I'm sure you remember Regan Smith going below the yellow line, and Andy Petrie and Dale Jarrett, like, I think it's legal on the last lap. They think that the rules are going to change given the circumstances. If it's the last lap, then there's this no rules apply. And for here, like, you see somebody who does something, and you can see it on your screen from TV. Like, you can see that he rolled early, and the driver saw it. Even Denny, you can tell he's trying to kind of sugarcoat it and go like, I went.
He's saying it without saying it, but no doubt, clear as day.
Yeah,
rolled early, jumps the restart, and again, like the fact that all of this came out after the race, and there was no real clear estimate as to when NASCAR was truly reviewing it, if they did truly review it, like, just shows that they weren't even thinking about it, in my opinion. Because again, like, these restart calls are called as soon as they happen. As soon as they see something, it's under review, and we didn't get that. And to say that you would call it differently under different circumstances is just absolutely insane to me. And, the one thing about NASCAR that's different from every other sport in these situations is that it does not have the luxury of calling a timeout, stopping the race to review a call, right? These are split-second decisions that happen real time, bang, bang calls, and it's like you're calling balls and strikes. So it's human nature to get things wrong. It's not always going to be right or wrong. But when we continue to talk about the inconsistency of being consistent with calling these things, and in a race where it wasn't just the restart, you mentioned the Kyle Busch wreck in stage 2 that was deemed caution, which we'll talk about it in a minute, because again, just change the complexion of this race. Is just crazy to me. And now we have to worry about this moving forward, because it's a slippery slope where if we get some overtime restarts on short tracks now, drivers are going to push the issue. They're going to try and find that edge, and they're going to try and pull NASCAR's hand into making them make a decision or not. And it just creates an extreme slippery slope to continue to be inconsistent, to continue to, I don't know if it's manufactured drama or whatever, but just continued to put us in these unfortunate situations where we're in a race that was just bad from top to bottom. We're now just spending days talking about this. Get the rule book out. If you're going to make decisions, make them by the book. And let's not have these conversations. It's frustrating, it's infuriating, and it's extremely irresponsible, I believe, when you have the people at the top of the sport saying these things. Why have the rule in place then? Just make it, make it a game time decision. I don't know, dude. It's extremely frustrating. But the complexion of this race was just extremely frustrating, because we talk about that caution from stage 2. That is my high stakes moment from the race. I mean, NASCAR elected to throw this caution for Kyle Busch. He barely scraped the wall, which totally killed the strategy element of this race. And I want to talk about or mention Denny Hamlin's comments. He talked about this on Actions Detrimental this week and says, quote, he basically, I feel like, defending NASCAR in this sense, which I don't agree with. But here's what he says. He says, quote, people were pitting when they thought it was best for them to pit, whether it be to get tires or maybe they're starting to slow down, whatever it might be. Stop right there. We want to see that. Like, I want to see guys go off strategy. We're not just waiting for a typical green flag cycle. I want to see these guys and these teams put the strategy in their own hands. Be different, because that is what Richmond has been built on. It's called the action track. It should be renamed to the strategy track, because that's the only selling point that this track has had for the last X amount of years or so. And fans were drooling over the strategy at Bristol a few weeks ago. Drooling over that. Was it really that necessary to be quick with the trigger here when Kyle Busch clearly was still rolling?
Mm-hmm.
And even on the broadcast, the broadcast crew was, unsure as to what that caution was for. Was it for Kyle Busch? Was it for something else? So, I digress there, but we want to see that strategy. This is where it gets interesting. Hamlin continues, says, I think that's why they threw this caution. It wasn't going to trap a lot of cars a lap down. They saw a car up against the wall. I don't know if they're really thinking about, well, who's on pit road? Who's going to get screwed by this? They don't have time to really think about that. They just saw a car up at the wall and threw a caution. They knew it wasn't right in the middle of a green flag cycle. Why would you throw cautions because you're worried about trapping people lap down? Number one, like a caution is a caution for a reason. You should not be throwing cautions based on who's getting trapped lap down, who's getting screwed. That's just part of racing, and that's part of the sport, dude. You can't predict that stuff. So why are you even doing that in the first place if they truly are? Again, it's interesting to me because I feel like NASCAR hasn't been so quick trigger with cautions recently. I feel like they've let things kind of pan out. We haven't seen really many single car spins called for cautions if drivers can get back down to the apron, if they can keep going. I feel like they've been more willing to let it ride and see what happens. So if they called this caution just to get a break from what the action was, because there wasn't any quote unquote action on the track, strategy should result in action. We don't get these strategy races, very often anymore. And it's never going to be on the level that Bristol was a couple weeks ago with the tire wear, but still we want to see strategy. Like that's a part of this sport, a part of the race that is not necessarily appreciated much anymore because all we're talking about is raw speed and all we're talking about is guys that are running up front. Like we want to see the pit strategy. And it didn't kill Larson's day. He was able to rally back and get a good finish. But Bubba, Bowman, Todd Gilliland was never even mentioned for the rest of the damn race after that pit strategy was shattered. And everybody was going to, they were going to run a two-stop strategy. We were never going to get a one-stop strategy anymore. So it's unfortunate. This race, again, was not good. From the broadcast to just watching it, it was not a great race. And then to get the typical NASCAR caution with 4 to go, and then we get an overtime restart just to kill everything. And with its controversy in itself, like it was just a really, really unfortunate turn of events. And I don't know, dude, like the inconsistencies with race control, like this was as bad as it's gotten, as at least from what I've seen. And I don't know where we go from here because now it's confusing. There are so many different levels to these things now, and it's going to be really tough to move forward because we don't know what the precedent is. When we think there's precedent, there's not precedent. But I'm going to get off my soapbox here and let you chime in because I got nothing else to say. I'm just incredibly disappointed with the product that we've gotten, and especially after the start of this season. It's been a dream start to the year from race, the racing to the storylines of what's been going on in the race, and this just I feel like killed so much of it because all we're talking about is what was clearly wrong, what should have been called, and I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel you, but I if stuff like this was incredibly common, I would be far more on that soapbox side. There's certain parts of it that definitely irk at me. The restart was definitely the bigger one because it was something that they even called out themselves. And when you put the line on that racetrack, I feel like that drastically changed how we are supposed to police that restart zone. Once you put a line, that line's supposed to be there for a reason, right? Like it wasn't always there. And in recent years, they've made the zone a little bit bigger. But I heard Dale Jr. say, if they're going to do it like this and not be like straight black and white with that line, just take it out. Just keep the line on the wall and then just keep it. I don't know how that would help because people are still going to be working on that line and eventually people are going to get called. And just as a fan, you're watching it, you're like, did he, the fans aren't going to know, really. It's going to be a lot more difficult to tell. And then the drivers are going to keep going back and back and back. But I mean, Denny had good points in regards to what it's like to lead going into a restart zone. In a way, you're actually not the control car. In a way, you're actually on a disadvantage, because you see the replay and you see Joey kind of leading up into the 11, which that in itself should be a penalty, in my opinion. Yeah. It's all about keeping a consistent pace, right, leading up into the zone. So I feel like the 22 should have been penalized as well, because that's all you can literally see it, and they have the throttle gauge and all that. They
see
have
all the data at their disposal.
They do, and they can see
everything here.
Yeah, the speedometer. They can see, if Denny's backing up, and that's why they're coming forward. Sometimes it's hard to look at two guys on the front row and see, because you don't know what each other's doing. But when you put a line on the road, like you're setting yourself up for having to police it pretty straightforward. And when they don't, and then when they go on and they straight up say, oh, if this was 20 laps earlier or 50 laps earlier, we would have called it differently. That's definitely really tough. But I know the Kyle Busch caution, that, I mean, that's just since day one in the sport. I feel like there's yellows that are called that maybe should have been called, or maybe they were called too soon, too early. Was there, did somebody see a piece of debris on the track? Did he straighten it out and get going? Did it cost somebody else other time? Was there cars on pit road? Many times, as I said, there's been green flag pit stops, and an incident will happen and they'll let it go. Or there will be a tire carcass, down by the apron, and they'll wait until everyone cycles through before the yellow. And I understand why they do that, but as you said, a yellow's a yellow. And I think if there's a piece of danger, or if one of the track officials by the catch fence, if they see something that stands out, I prefer when they call it safe, because I think the conversation flips on its head when we don't call it yellow and then something more significant happens. Mm-hmm. We've had guys hit pieces of debris that the track officials missed, and there was a lot of damage to race cars, and that's an even bigger conversation. So I definitely don't see it as manufactured drama. I've always felt like a caution is called for a reason. Now, what that reason is, that's where the debate can start, and I'm open to that. But I don't see this as something that happens far enough to where I'm worried about next week. I think the restart zone, that's going to be a big topic. I'm going to be at Martinsville, and we're going to be asking the drivers. Every driver is going to be asked about, okay, guys, what do you restart? What are you going to do? Do you know what to do? During the drivers meeting, are you guys going to be waving your hand? They usually don't ask questions anymore, but I know when Ryan Newman used to race, he's always known as the guy who would raise his hand and kind of keep them honest on certain rules that they're inconsistent about. He's not around anymore, but I think there's enough guys who are going to ask them, what the hell are we supposed to? What do you want us to do? Okay, because this is all about what you guys are looking at. So that's going to be a huge story, and rightfully so.
Right, it's a hot button topic, and I think you are going to get a lot of drivers trying to just get clarification, because if one guy, like, let's just say hypothetically, we get an overtime restart in this race at Martinsville, and we have a driver not named Denny Hamlin basically do exactly the same thing, and they get penalized. Oh, dude, like, the dam's going to break. And these drivers then, I think, are really going to go after it, because if you let it slide, that's the problem. Like, that's why I think it's so reckless to not call it and then to blatantly say after the fact that, oh, yeah, we probably should have, but it could be different. You never know. Like, what are we doing? I just can't. I can't wrap my head around that. Like, I think it's, oh my God, it's laughable.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Like, we see certain calls, and they're really, really close. And with restarts, it's always been really close. They're always pushing it. And at some point, like, you have to call it, what they say, ball and strike call. Sometimes it comes down to the eyes. That's the game that they're putting themselves into. The line, I guess, doesn't matter. And it's just all about optics and how it is. Like, how much of an advantage did you gain? I know Truex was still alongside of him technically going in the one. I don't know what they gauged it on, but they kind of opened this up, and yeah, they can't. The only way they can call it is if it's really egregious, which is pretty rare in this sport. I feel mostly the penalty that I have a beef with is usually pulling out of the line and making it 3 wide before the start finish line. We see that often, and it's not usually called. I always call it out in truck races, but in Xfinity, Parker Retzlaff did it, and there was no call. So there's a lot of things that have to be kind of ironed out. But with that, it's all down to the eyeball test from them.
Yeah. And it's not going to be perfect every time, but
yeah,
we continue to have these conversations when things get going in a positive direction. I feel like we just relapse back into, well, here we are again. What's right? What's wrong? Find the balance. Like, they have a rule book. There are rules for a reason. Stay by it. Like, stand by it. Because if it's in the rule book, then that's how you should be policing it. That's how you should be proceeding. And at least give these drivers enough of a precedent to understand what they could do. How far can they push it before it's too far? So it's a shame for Martin Truex Jr., man. I mean, you talked about him, but obviously frustrated running into virtually everybody after the checkered flag. Kyle Larson was funny in his post-race interview with Jamie Little, just kind of talking about that. And, he kind of brushed it off because, again, if you're Martin Truex Jr., you dominate that race. You lead over 200 laps. Like, you're the best car. And it definitely got interesting at the end when he's having to battle through lap traffic. That gap is slowly getting closer between the second place car. And then I feel like this always happens to Martin. He, like you said, annihilates races more than any other driver in the field. When he dominates, he dominates, and it's so impressive watching him just absolutely wipe the floor. But he can't seem to close the deal. He has the bad luck bug bigger than anybody in the Cup Series, and over the last couple of years, that's just how it's been. So absolute heartbreak. I mean, if he should be running into anybody, it should be Bubba Wallace, because Bubba Wallace is the reason why they're in that spot. And, unfortunately put himself in that restart. So, we joke about the Larson stuff. Truex was not necessarily happy with how Denny raced him. I personally didn't see too much. It's the final restart. You're not going to give anybody an inch, whether it's your teammate or not. We talked about it last week at COTA with Ty Gibbs and Christopher Bell. Like, a win is on the line. You're not going to move over for anybody if it's your teammate or not. It's just unfortunate that we had a caution and you were a victim of it. But
and that shows that Martin's probably given away some wins in the past. We see him racing teammates quite often for wins.
Yeah,
that makes you notice how much room does he give these guys, and how many wins is he supposed to have on his tally that he doesn't, because he kind of takes it easy on people.
Right, and you even said it. Like, Truex is not the kind of guy that's gonna rough up someone else. He races with respect, and that's admirable. But when it comes down to it, you're a veteran of the sport, dude. Like, Father Time is not on your side right now, and the retirement rumors have been running rampant over the last couple of years. When is this going to be Martin Truex last year? All that stuff. So that's obviously a cloud that still hovers over, but you're a veteran of the sport. You're a former champion. Like, be aggressive. Like, not saying wreck somebody, but use them up.
Or just stand up for yourself.
Probably use some of that medicine.
Just stand up for yourself. That thing with Joey in 2018, that was damaging to his reputation in a certain way. As you said, it's admirable when we have drivers like that, and you can argue they're a dying breed nowadays. But 2018, that was just a different deal. Joey completely drove straight through him. I was shooting by the catch fence, and that whole thing happened right by me. I'm like, holy hell. And he said, you won the battle, not going to win the damn war. And then Homestead, Joey's,
he's still fighting that war with every driver in the field.
He is. And with Joey, he just let him cruise on past him. Every lap he was gaining on that outside, and he just didn't really give him anything there. And you just see it with this. I think a lot of guys, they look at Martin as somebody who they can kind of run through a little bit because they know he's gonna cry to the media. He's gonna say, "Oh, it's too hard to pass, too hard to pass." Oh, he used me up there. It's whatever. Then he goes out fishing and he comes back a brand new man, and it never leads to anything, you know. So I hate to say that about a guy, as you said, who's been around for nearly 20 years in national NASCAR racing, and he's a champion in multiple series. But when there's certain guys who you can run over, who you feel like can take it, and you're not going to have the consequences a week, a year down the line, they're going to do it. And he's on his way out soon. We don't know if this is his last year, what next year has in mind, what's after next year. So that definitely doesn't help either.
Yeah. Wow. That's so unfortunate. But it is what it is, man. If you're not going to take a risk and just be a little aggressive, like there's gonna be a lot of wins that you're not able to close the deal on. And sometimes you have to do that. Like, this is NASCAR, these cars can take a punch nowadays, especially. So just do it, man. Like, don't hold back. Like,
right.
We want to see that, but it's unfortunate. I think there's going to be a heavy fire under that number 19's hood this weekend and moving forward. So we'll kind of see what happens. One last thing before we talk about some stock up, stock down drivers. Your take on the wet weather tires, because I thought to begin the race on those wet weather tires, I thought the racing itself, I thought that it was a success. I thought the tires, they performed well. I don't necessarily agree with how this race started, because I feel like the entire first third of stage one was just run under caution because they couldn't dry pit road. We had non-competitive pit stops. I would rather delay the race, make sure everything is good to go for competitive pit stops. And if we have to start on wet weather tires, so be it. Let the teams decide when they want to switch to slicks from wet weather tires. I don't know why we had to bring everybody down to make, or why NASCAR had the authority to make the call on when guys should put the slick tires on. Let the teams choose. Strategy. Come on. There's a common theme here, ladies and gentlemen. Strategy. I don't know, dude. I don't get it. But my question to you is, would you rather see the race started as it was this weekend, or would you rather see it wait until everything is completely dry? Because I feel like, again, the first stage of this race, it was just caution laps. It was yay, we started the race on time, but at what cost? You know what I mean? So what's your take on that?
I think really, I love the rain tires. And I think that the biggest issue with that was, as you said, not letting the teams decide when they were going to switch over. And I think the biggest thing that really put kind of an ending to that excitement was the fact that pit road wasn't really prepared. I think before we started the race, as soon as the cars left pit road, that's when they should have started the drying process. And maybe they did, but they weren't able to get it done in time. But that really comes down to rain tires are going to be fine on pit road, right? It's that switch over to the slicks around lap 30, which ended up being lap 45 or whatever, how long that yellow was. That's when they knew the issue was, guys getting out of the pit box and flying by at 40 miles an hour with crews out there. Yeah, it was going to be tough in wet conditions. If that pit road if they were able to get that ready in time, maybe just get the cars off of pit road, sit them there for a little bit, dry the track, and then we just get the regular pace laps and then green flag and everything's ready. But I do not like when they throw a yellow and that's the yellow for the tire change. I found that one of the most fascinating parts of having different tire compounds was seeing what the teams are willing to do with it. And we know when it starts raining, and NASCAR's been a lot better with this since Daytona in 2022, even when there's weather in the area, it's not even raining yet, they throw the caution because they know that the rain's coming. And then a few minutes later, rain starts hitting turn 2, and okay, we're good. We didn't have to find out the hard way, a car going into turn 2 and just going straight into the catch. We didn't have to find out that way. And I love that they're doing that. But I think when the rain is gone and there's no rain in sight, I love when they're able to kind of switch over themselves. And some guys do it early and gain all that time, and some guys do it later and they end up losing it later. I love that. I think it's a great idea for an all-star race down the line where everyone is required to use a set of rain tires in dry conditions. Of course, they're not going to last long. The wear is going to be crazy. But at some point in the race, 50 lap, 100 lap race, whatever, you have to use a set of rain tires. You can use them early and fall, a lap down and then just be gaining it the rest of the way, or you save them for the end and try it that way. I think there's a lot that we can do with this tire. And you said it led to a great opening 30 laps. I was inside of 1 and 2, and I could not believe how wide that track was. Everybody was right by the wall. I think Kyle Busch was in the 3rd lane, and there were 2 cars on his outside still. It was like one lane on the track had 3 cars, almost 3 wide. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. And, the pace was slower, but the cars were moving. And Justin Haley gained 20 something positions.
Watching Josh Berry just barrel roll his way through the field was sick, dude.
Yeah, and then big guys were falling to the back, and it wasn't working out for them. Michael McDowell surprisingly didn't fare too well. So it was really cool seeing all of that, and seeing Chase take the lead, and the fans exploded when the cars started up, when the cars got onto the track, and then for the green flag, and then Chase getting the lead. It was incredible energy in the start. And Richmond's always known for that, but just seeing it come to a forced end, and okay, it's over. We had our chance. Yes, we're gonna make sure you guys are safe. You can't handle this, so we're gonna do it for you. Now we're gonna lead over. It kind of just but it's a work in progress. They're trying to keep it safe, and they don't want to lose all of this reputational damage of what they're trying to do with these tires when it's still in the baby phases right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but at least from an on-track perspective, when the cars were running, we got some really good racing. It's nice to have this luxury to be able to do. I just hope that in the future we can put the control in the people that are calling the shots atop the pit box and the drivers that are, behind the wheel. Give these guys a little bit more say in what actually goes on during the race. And as a result, give us something to be intrigued about. Because, for races like Richmond and other tracks where the actual racing isn't necessarily the most exciting, but it is all that additional strategy component that provides the storylines. Let the teams make the decisions. So we'll see if we get any more of these rainy situations on these types of tracks. See how it progresses, but regardless, it was nice to see. It was just a little difficult to watch at times, watching these guys just run under caution and, not really get the full experience of the rain tires. But that's a lot of great stuff from Richmond. Let's just quickly run through some drivers whose stock is trending in the right and wrong direction. For me, my guy, sliced bread, Joey Logano, finally bounces back in a big way. Leaves Richmond with a runner-up finish. Really good stuff from the 22. Had really good speed. He was consistently up there. So finally gets that top 5 and heads to a track where he's been damn good. He's got the best average finish at Martinsville over the last 6 races. He's been awesome in the next-gen era as well. And, in a race where Ryan Blaney is going to get a ton of talk about, obviously, he's one of the favorites for a reason. He smoked the field last year. I think Logano, if he can build on what we saw at Richmond, Martinsville is a great spot for him to continue to, put together a top 5, potentially challenge for the win. But you'd like to see this from, a 2-time champion, someone that I was very high on preseason, who definitely needs to start really raking some of these finishes. And just really good to see, not only from him, but I think Ford in general is going to have a pretty good weekend this week at Martinsville. But Joey Logano pointing his season in the right direction with a very strong effort at Richmond. It was really, really encouraging to see some speed out of that 22 for a change, not just in qualifying, but in race trim.
Yeah, and Joey pre-race, he was pretty confident that it was going to be typical Richmond, and I think post-race that was probably the drinking word of every driver. Typical Richmond. And for Joey, I think he wanted that. I don't think he wanted drastic changes because he's the short tracks tend to be one of his strongest suits, and Martinsville specifically, but Richmond as well, and that worked out very well for him. And when you think of drivers getting their first top fives of the year, you had Joey, you also had Chase Elliott, and it's been a while since he's had a top five on a non-super speedway oval, and that was Nashville nearly a year ago. That was last June now, and it was a really good Sunday for him. He ran there up in the top five throughout the night, faded late, but kind of took advantage of the late squabble up front, had a good restart, and ended up getting by his teammate, getting up into fifth. And I think Martinsville can be really good for Chase. This is some momentum that he really needs. We've been seeing him kind of sneak up front for a minute, and then we just don't hear a lot about him for a while. He did something similar at Bristol, but Martinsville, this race last year was his first race back after his injury, and he got a top 10 in that race, and he's annihilated races here in the past. 4 times he's led over 100 laps, twice over 200. He won here in 2020. It's a really strong place for him. He made his debut this race 9 years ago. I was there for that. And he's just had a lot of big moments in his career happen in this race. Of course, that 2020 win set him up for the title in Phoenix. So I think this is a place where he can really get his head back into a good spot, and having a top 5 run. And he was really happy after Sunday night when we spoke to him. Bringing that into this, that can be a deadly combination for anybody else.
Yeah, good for Chase. Good for Chase. That's wild that he hasn't finished top 5 since Nashville last year. That's a long stretch. But
on a non-super speedway oval.
Non-super speedway
oval. He had one at Daytona,
well,
one at Chicago, but a regular oval.
Yeah, that's the road courses for sure. But still, on a non-super on a traditional oval like that, or short track, whatever, is still really shocking from him. Good to see. Obviously, Chase, he's a conversation starter for the sport, so we want to see him up front. Obviously, the response when he took the lead to start the race at Richmond tells you everything you need to know. People love Chase Elliott. Nice to see. So, yeah, Hendrick could be really good this week. Martinsville, big weekend for them. One driver it's not going to be a good weekend for is Kyle friggin' Busch, dude. What's going on with this 8 car? Yeah. Richmond marked his 4th finish of 20th or worse to start this year. He's got 0 stage points in the last 4 races. And I feel like the only times we're talking about Kyle Busch, he's getting TV time, is when they're panning to him spinning out, running off pace, or losing the race by mere inches if it's Atlanta. You know what I mean? It just has not been good for this 8 car, and we've talked about him over the last couple of weeks, but it continues to not get better. And I don't think it's going to get better in Martinsville. He has not been good here lately. He's finished outside of the top 20 in the last 3 races. I know RCR, they've kind of made some changes for Austin Dillon. They're putting Justin Alexander back atop the pit box, which I really hope injects a little bit of life into that number 3 car, because not to just pivot to Austin real quick, but I feel like for him, he gets a lot of hate for being RCR's grandson, for running the 3 car, and he has not been good. But I do think that there is a lot of frustration from Austin based on team decision-making during the race. And Justin Alexander's a proven crew chief. He's got a long history at RCR working with those guys. So hopefully he can inject a little bit of life into that 3 car, and we can start to see Austin not run 25th or worse, but maybe top 20. But for Kyle Busch, man, it's rough. It's really rough. And I don't know when it's going to get better, because this team just can't seem to put themselves in a good position. And it seems like something is always striking down on that number 8 recently. It's a shame, because Kyle is incredibly talented. You know, the move over to RCR last year, there was so much hype around it. You know, the Kyle Busch resurgence, the revenge tour, like getting back to his best, and it's as worse as it's gotten in recent years. So I don't know when it's going to turn around, but it's really it's tough to watch. It's tough to watch.
It is, and these type of races this year, just how they've gone, it's been a veteran savvy type of season. I feel, like even Byron, he's basically a veteran now, but you see Denny and Truex and these guys doing super well. Keselowski, where's Busch? He's totally supposed to be in that conversation. And just not being in the Netflix show, from the playoffs last year, and just starting this year outside of Atlanta and that iconic finish that we're going to remember forever. Outside of him being one of those cars, we really just haven't seen him outside of Fox 10 seconds after the spin, right? It always takes him a long time to get to the incident, but then fair. We see him, backwards or just having an issue. And week after week, that starts to damage how people look. Maybe not at you. He is Kyle Busch. He's one of the greatest race car drivers who's ever been behind the wheel of a car. But how you look at him this year and how you look at that team and how seriously we take him every week. I just don't think anyone's picking him anymore. He's not on anybody's stat sheet on, oh, you got to pick this guy. He can be an 8-time winner at a track. And you're like, I don't think he's going to do well, because it's always about, what you've done lately. And he just hasn't done anything lately. And he's been there with Austin Dillon, like not to harp on that, but like they were not very close last year. Kyle, especially in the first half of the year, he was in a totally different place than that 3 car. And seeing Dillon make those changes and bringing Alexander back on, I think that can be actually a really good decision. If you look at when they were paired together, that's when Austin won all of his races. All 4 of his wins came with Alexander, and you can literally look at it. If you look at his seasons, you can tell which seasons he wasn't with Justin. It was 2019 and 2023. Those were his 2 worst years in the past 7 years. And those were the 2 years without him. So I think having him back on is a huge move in the right direction. A new lead engineer for them. Is Randall Burnett on his way out? I don't know. Are they going to start making moves on the 8-car side? I'm not entirely sure. I feel like it's been long enough to where those question marks are being led into serious conversation, and I think they should be, because I don't know where they go from here and where it ends. It is Kyle Busch. He can come out of it at any time, but it's been a while now, and I'm definitely getting concerned, and I know they are inside of the team. And one other guy that I had on the downward spiral, that was Ryan Preece, and that was somebody who you were looking at going into the weekend, and so was I. Like, it seemed like a race that he would kind of show his strengths that we know have been in there since his modified days. And so far this year, he has been the only SHR driver to not really been bringing that optimistic type of pace. He was the only SHR guy outside the top 20 in Richmond. He has the lowest number of top 15 finishes this year, only 1. He's the lowest in points, only guy not to lead a lap, and he has the worst average finish. To have a couple of those numbers is a concern. To have all of them across 4 cars, 2 of them being rookies, that's definitely not what you would want. And in talks of the team shrinking potentially going into 2025, maybe selling a charter. You think of all the sponsors they've lost coming into this year with Anheuser-Busch, Smithfield, Hunt Brothers Pizza. Like, yeah, that's a lot of things in a bad direction. And perhaps they're looking at the guy who's not bringing the dough on Sundays. And right now it's Ryan. So I'm concerned about him, because his 3 teammates have been, I've been liking what I've been seeing from them. Really good consistency. Chase, I had a great sit down with him on Saturday, and he's taken this leadership role very seriously. And he told me that to have a leadership role, it's not just about being around the longest. He does have tenure at the team, but it's about who's the biggest performer, and he thinks that the leader is the guy who's bringing home the best finishes every week. And Harvick was the leader, not just because of, he's been at the team for 8, 9, 10 years. No, he's the only guy who's winning races. He's the only guy getting top 5s and bringing home the results. So he wants to be that guy. And I don't see Preece getting to that level at that team at this moment.
Yeah, he's certainly been the worst performing SHR driver this year. We've seen steady improvement from most everybody else. And I was disappointed with Priest this past weekend. Like he just kind of fell off. He was like running borderline top 10, but then just fell off and wasn't to be seen again. And this is his bread and butter. You know, Martinsville is another track, his bread and butter. And the pace has not been there. I want to look at him this weekend, but we just haven't been able to see it. He's really kind of floundered in those potential spots where there may be upside, and there are certainly upside with some of the other drivers in the SHR camp. And in hearing about the potential to downsize that team, maybe sell a charter, like the first driver you look at on the short end of it could be Ryan Preece, especially when you factor in the sponsorship element, because they have lost not only sponsors but primary sponsors that have been on the hoods of those cars for years. So we'll see what happens with the future of SHR, with the future of some of those drivers. But it's certainly not moving in the right direction for Priest when it is for Gregson and Barry and Chase Briscoe trying to put together some good finishes. So we'll see what happens in Martinsville. And that is a perfect segue to Martinsville. So we have odds for the Cookout 400 on the screen there, courtesy of DraftKings. But first, Zach, you've got a trivia question for me, and I hopefully got an answer for you.
As you mentioned earlier, it's a really big weekend it's a big year for Hendrick Motorsports. This is their 40th anniversary year from back in 1984. And it really, technically not where it started, but it's where it could have easily ended. And that was here at Martinsville when Jeff Bodine got that huge win in 1984. And so, 40 years since then. He's not the only driver to win at Martinsville for Hendrick Motorsports. There's been quite a few. And I'm asking you, they've won 28 times at Martinsville, Hendrick Motorsports drivers. How many drivers have won there for Hendrick? And can you name them?
Yes, I think so. So you have Jeff, the Gordon variety, at the top. You have 7-time also there at the top. You have Jeff of the GEOFF variety in there. I know Kyle Larson because he won last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many. I don't know how many, like number wise. Byron has not won there.
He has actually.
Did he?
He did. Yeah, 2022.
Okay. Well, that's tough. Chase has one there.
Chase, yeah.
Is there anybody like in the mid 2000s? Did Kyle Busch ever win there with Hendrick? I don't believe he did.
Not. No.
I'm thinking like Terry Labonte, which I believe he won there. So I have both Jeffs, Jimmy, Larson, Byron, Chase. That's 6. So
3 more.
There's 3 more.
And 2 of them are recent. Fairly recent.
2 of them are recent, fairly recent. Did Mark Martin do it with Hendrick?
He did not.
Okay.
It's surprisingly how many drivers didn't win for Hendrick, actually. But
I'm stupid. Bowman. Alex Bowman won there. He hacked his way into a win. And there's 2 more.
2 more.
What the hell am I not thinking of?
One was way back in the day. He won 4 times, actually. And then one was in the mid-2010s.
Mid-2010s?
Yeah.
Mid-2010s Hendrick Motorsports driver. So, oh, my God. Junior.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, man.
Childhood dream.
Yeah. That was yeah.
Yeah.
A couple brain farts. I don't know if I'm going to get the last one. 4 times? Who is it?
Dale Waltrip.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. He won there a lot of times, but 4 of them was with Hendrick. And the biggest thing that stood out to me about looking over these winners was how many drivers they have now who are able to win at Martinsville. So the first 30 years, 1984 to 2014, at least before Dale's win, they only had 4 guys win there, and most of them were Gordon and Jimmy. But since 2014, they've had 5 guys. So in the first 30 years, they had 4 guys win. In the last 10, they've had 5, and it's all no one's really run away like Gordon and Jimmy did. Junior got 1, Chase, Bowman, Byron, and Larson, all 4 drivers who race today. They've all won there 1 time. So it's interesting seeing for many years they had 2 guys and none of the other teammates. You just mentioned a lot of guys who weren't able to win there for Hendrick, but now today all of them win, but they just don't run away and win 4 in a row like Jeff or Jimmy did. It's interesting.
Watching Jeff and Jimmy in some of those Martinsville races just deke it out head to head was top tier NASCAR.
Throwing
really,
Denny there, those 3 were just astonishing.
Yeah, that's peak. That's peak Martinsville, but that's a subpar performance on my end.
That wasn't bad.
The recent ones, Bowman, because I literally wrote about Bowman. As we will come to find out, and believe it or not, he won in 2021. So hey, it is a big weekend for Hendrick. 40th anniversary, big year, 40th anniversary. If you like, storyline bets, look at Hendrick Motorsports because they're really good here, as Zach has mentioned. But it's time for our Sunday slips. We're going to give out an outright winner we like. We're going to give out a finishing prop we like, and we are going to give out a head-to-head matchup that we like for this weekend at Martinsville. Zach, I'm going to start. I want to start with my matchup, and I'm going to take – I sent you some. I have pivoted. I have different ones here. Okay. I'm going to take Ty Gibbs to finish better than Brad Keselowski. He's minus 130. It's a lot of juice to squeeze, but I think it's worth the squeeze here. And it's more of a fade Keselowski spot because he hasn't been great at Martinsville in the next-gen car. Mm-hmm. He's got finishes of 33rd, 24th, 36th, and 17th in the 4 races running the next-gen. And I know that some of these finishes aren't indicative of where this team ran, whether it was pit stop strategy or wrecks, things of that nature. Regardless, the finishes are the finishes. And I think Ty Gibbs can finish better than Keselowski this weekend. He had top 5 speed in the fall. He's improved in every trip to Martinsville and Cup of his 3. And again, betting on Toyota to be very strong. I think Gibbs will have a fast enough car to beat Keselowski. Again, even if we are squeezing some juice here at minus 130. But I think that Gibbs, yes, he kind of fell back down to earth at Richmond. Wasn't really a factor at all. Didn't really mention his name at all when talking about the Toyotas. But I think it's a good spot here in Martinsville, and I think that he is going to finish better than Brad K. So give me Gibbs over Keselowski, minus 130.
Yeah, for my matchup, I think it's funny. It always tends to be this way when 2 guys kind of come head-to-head one weekend. They have a matchup on DraftKings the following week, but I think Truex and Hamlin is really interesting. And as we mentioned with Martin, I don't. Even if it does come down to them 2 on the final lap, I don't think he's gonna do anything draft. I think it's just going to be regular Martin. And I think in that circumstance, you got to go with a guy who's willing to put it all on black, no matter who he's racing with. Denny, he pushes the envelope further than anybody in terms of what he's willing to do during a race. We've seen him and Larson come head-to-head, nose-to-nose multiple times just in the last year. And Denny's done that his whole career, and that's why I think he's going to hit 60 wins in his career. I think it's going to happen. Probably not this year. I don't see him winning, eight more times, but he's on such a different level, just mentally. The performance has been great. Truex has been amazing this year, honestly. Like if you look at the loop data and just everything, the numbers he's putting together, it's been a great year, but he just hasn't scored that win, and he's just what did Kyle Petty call him? Eeyore, with his tail between his legs after a race. That tends to be where he gets mentally, but he usually bounces back pretty well. It's going to be a tight battle. I think Martin, he's led tremendous amount of laps here. You called it. Like when he does have that car and the execution and the team is there, he's unstoppable. He's been like that, when he joined Furniture Row Racing, then when he transitioned to Gibbs, just completely lights out. So it could be one of those days, and that's why this is a matchup that I'm looking at. I give Denny the advantage at minus 175 to Truex's plus 135, but I think it can get close. It's something I'm looking at.
Yeah, those are two favorites for sure. Yeah, if you're thinking about it, from especially if the race progresses and we get late race shenanigans and it's going to be Denny versus Truex again, you definitely give a little bit of an advantage to Denny just with his driving style. But again, I think there's going to be a serious fire under this 19's hood this weekend. I think he's going to be incredibly fast, and I think he's certainly going to be as good as the rest of these Toyotas, as he has been. Just hasn't had the wins to show for it. But, he's been very strong and he's been on a very, very good run. Just has not been able to close the deal. My prop for this week, I am going to take Joey Logano. I'm going to take him to finish in the top 5 at plus 135 on DraftKings. And for all the reasons that I mentioned for why his stock is up, he's got an average finish inside the top 5, 4th in the next gen car. He's finished top 10 in the last 9. He's got 5 top 5s in that span. And, again, I think all the conversation is going to be about Ryan Blaney. Blaney was nowhere at Richmond. It was shocking to see that 12 car as bad as it was. But he's awesome at Martinsville. He smoked the field here last year. I think Logano deserves the same respect. So I think a top 5 finish is well in the cards for the 22. I think he's going to be a top 5 contender, and I will take him at plus 135 on DraftKings to finish there.
Yeah, I'm looking at Chase Briscoe to get a top 5 at.
I love this. I just, for the record, love this bet.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite. I'm talking about it in my article for NBC this week, so I love it.
Yeah, plus 275, and for a top 3, I think it's plus 600. That maybe it's a little more trickier. But with 4 straight top 10s at Martinsville, back-to-back top 5s, this is a really, really good place for him. And we mentioned Stuart Haas earlier. Priest got the pole here last year, dominated early. Just an issue on pit road that once he lost that track position, tends to be the case at Martinsville. You're kind of done. But with Briscoe, he also has those qualifying numbers. Doesn't have a pole there, but 3 straight top 5 starts with 2/3. And that's a huge part of this game is getting that track position and keeping it. And he's proven to be able to do that. And unlike last year, he's coming into this race with great momentum. Like in my opinion, it's been his best start to the year. He does have his most top 15s, his best average finish. I know 2022, he won a race early, but he had a lot of bad races every other week. So this year, it's been a much more cleaner slate, top 15 pace every week. And coming into a race where he's had great numbers his whole career, but especially from last year, it can be a really good weekend for driver 14.
Yeah, I'm with you there for all the reasons you mentioned. It is about track position, and he has qualified exceptionally well and has kept the car there. He's led laps. So, his name is always going to be tossed around at Martinsville. And I think the number is really good at almost 3-1 odds. So I love the Chase Briscoe call out for a top 5. For my winner, going a little long here because I think that there's not much value, in my opinion, for some of these outright winners this weekend on the draft board. But I was able to find Alex Bowman at plus 3,000. He's 28-1 on DraftKings, but plus 3,000 is the best number I've been able to find. And that is over on BetMGM. He's also there on Caesars. But 30-1 for Alex. Look, I'm a big what have you done for me lately kind of guy when it comes to drivers that I'm looking at in the betting market. And that number 48 has been doing a lot for me lately. Even getting trapped in that caution, he was very good at Richmond. So if it weren't for that, probably would have been a top 5 car. So like I said, won in 2021, has not been great here since. He's been like a 10th to 12th place car. But again, this is a bet where early in the week, I think the number is going to see movement. I think, again, it's a very big weekend for Hendrick. I think Bowman with the speed he has shown, the form that this 48 has been in is very impressive. And I kind of subtract a lot of that history, over the last couple of years just because of the form that he's in. And again, he's healthy. He doesn't have the injury designation in coming back. And I think he's going to be a sneaky little pick this weekend. He's shown he can get it done, once before. So I think at plus 3,000, you're getting value for Alex. And again, I expect this number to get shorter. I think you're going to be looking more in the 25, 22 to 1 range once we get to the weekend. And of all the Hendrick Motorsports guys, when you have, the Larsons, I think Byron's number is great always, but I don't want to be chalk all the time because I feel like I talk Byron all the time. Even though the prices, there's still an advantage there. But give me Alex. I'm going to roll the dice a little bit and take Alex Bowman at plus 3,000.
Yeah, I think going into last week, I think Joey Logano would be considered kind of rolling the dice a little bit. But I just feel he's a momentum type of guy, and he's been really well at Martinsville. But yeah, Richmond was just such a great night for him, and not just the finish. It's not like he kind of found himself into second, because he wasn't. He was able to get second right at the end on that last restart, but he ran top 5 all night long. He was top 5 in average running position, driver rating, ran a bunch of fastest laps of the race. So just overall, that showed that this is here. He is here. And he has the highest average finish in the last 3 years at Martinsville. He's really the only guy on a real run of top 10s there. He's got 9 straight going back to 2019, which is really tough to do at a place like that. He's got a couple second place finishes these last couple years. And I think he's going to be could be really strong. Could he go back to where he was pre-Richmond? Totally could happen. But I think if he's going to wake up and start moving this year, I think Blaney can be right there with him. If he's going to do that, it would be right now. It's a good run of races for him.
Come on, Joey. Wake up.
Wake up.
Start moving. Please. Yep. Let's get some wins in the column there, Joey. We need them. I like it. No, I like Logano. I obviously like him as a top 5. So to win the race would be so much better. And I do think that he's going to be able to contend and put his car up front. Again, we look at drivers that tend to be more on the aggressive side. Joey's one of them. Martinsville, there's not a lot of room. The bumper's going to be handed to you. So Logano is a fan of using the bumper. And, he might need some of that, this weekend. So I think Joey is a fair play in the outright market as well. I really like it. So those are our slips for Sunday. Again, as always, shop around for your best price in the betting market for drivers. And as always, bet responsibly. But with all that said, Zach, final thoughts before we put a bow on this show.
Woo! A lot of stories, as we said, just a lot of stuff to look at, and it's a really interesting time in the season when we are getting over those early year jitters and getting into the real meat and potatoes of where teams are at. And we have this little short track swing that we're on currently, but that changes quickly. By the end of the month, we're going to Talladega, and then we go to Dover, I think it's before that or after that, and we're getting to high banks and high speeds, and before we know it, we're doing the Coke 600, and it's a kind of a string of 1.5 miles and into the summer stretch. It just happens so quick, So I'm really excited to see where these teams go, where the sport goes in these next few weeks. But Martinsville is really important. It's a track that they come back to later in the year, so it's not somewhere that you can just sleep on and not think it's going to rear its ugly head back if you don't have your short track program together. So really interested to see how everything goes. And I'll be there, boots on the ground again. It's a really fun track. It's just that entire Martinsville area. Everybody comes out. They camp out. A lot of people come to see that race. And it's a great part of the country in Virginia. And cannot wait for it.
Yeah. Love Martinsville. I was fortunate enough to be there a couple years ago with the infamous Hail Melon. That was my first and only trip to Martinsville, and that was a hell of a treat to be treated to. So even though I didn't see it at all real time because I was so focused on Dude, so just
Where you
quickly, real
looking?
quick. Where was I looking? I was looking at the damn race winner because nobody expected Chastain to pull that one out of his ass. Like I was on the I was on the opposite side. I was on the turn 1 and 2 side, and I'm Christopher Bell wins the race. Like I'm focused on the winner, and then I see Chastain just ripping it, going so fast, and crossing the line, and then that's when obviously the crowd freaks out. Everybody's going bananas. And on the MRN broadcast, they're like, what? They're like, what the hell happened? Ross Chastain just pulled the video game move. And, as we leave, see all the videos that come out of it. That was my only time in Martinsville. Hell of a track. Yeah. Definitely would love to get back down there, but it's a coveted race. It's a big one that drivers want to check the box on their racing resume. So hopefully the intensity is up. Hopefully we don't have overtime restarts and we can get a clean bill of health in this race because we need it after this weekend. But
it's not the overtime finish; it's how they police it.
It's the police.
I like overtime.
It's just an overtime finish. Yeah, yes. Overtime finish, exciting. Just don't leave a sour taste, please.
Yes, please.
We don't need that 2 weeks in a row. But we'll see what happens. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. As always, check us out on YouTube on the High Stakes NASCAR podcast. We'll have clips being posted throughout the week. As for myself, I'll have my betting preview for this race posted Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. Depending on when that can go out, I'll have my Xfinity preview for the Dude Wipes 250, everybody's favorite name of a race, a favorite sponsor of the sport. That will be out probably Friday morning. Did very well at Richmond, hitting on Chandler Smith for the second time this year. He's been like my William Byron of the Xfinity series, so that's awesome. But I'll have that out for the NASCAR betting preview show more than likely on Friday. And then, of course, you can check out the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel. Zach does have a awesome feature on Stewart Haas Racing with Chase Briscoe on there, so you definitely want to check that out and everything else that's coming out for NBC Sports and Motorsports on NBC. And, Zach, if you have anything cooking in Martinsville, let the people know.
Got a few hot dogs I'm going to be taking, but
I was trying to find a way to sneak that in there, but I was like, no, I'm gonna.
You said cooking. You said cooking. You set me up for that. Every year I go, I try to have at least one. But on the video side, we're gonna see. We have the requests out currently, so but got a few guys in mind. Definitely a lot of fascinating stories to look at. But going in, Motorsports on NBC got the Chase Briscoe feature out there. He was great. Spoke to the Spire Motorsports rookie duo, Carson Hocevar, Zane Smith, and where they're at in their current seasons and their careers. Then, of course, the NASCAR on NBC podcast with Nate Ryan. I was able to make an appearance on there. So a lot to check out going into this week and a bunch of stuff to catch up on after the week. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. Love Martinsville. Should be a great race. And we will be breaking it down next week. So thanks as always for checking us out and listening. Be sure to check me out on Twitter at MV Bachmann and check us out again on the High Stakes YouTube channel. We will be back to break down Martinsville and look ahead to everybody's favorite track, Texas.